On Wrestling family, welcome back to the channel. So we're going to react to matches that actually deserve to main event WrestleMania. Now I got a couple in my head, but I don't want to jump ahead of the video. I want to let it do its thing. Now before we get started, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We are right around the corner from 11K. Thank you guys so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. You guys make this so much fun. I really do appreciate that. But without further ado, let's get into this.
10 matches that deserved to main event WrestleMania. Number 10, The Rock vs. Hulk Hogan, WrestleMania 18. WrestleMania 18 was main evented by the 2002 Royal Rumble winner Triple H vs. Chris Jericho. Whilst this was indeed a suitable world title match for WrestleMania, it was ultimately overshadowed by a dream match between The Rock and Hulk Hogan. The dream match exceeded all expectations, and numerous wrestlers, including Jericho himself, have stated that the match should have been in the main event slot, as Jericho and the game had an impossible task. The Rock vs. Hogan also deserved the main event slot because The Rock's work during the Invasion storyline was superb, and he was still arguably the most over wrestler in the entire company. Nevertheless, whilst it remains disappointing that the dream match didn't headline the biggest show of the year, it didn't hinder the magic that was the inaugural Rock vs. Hogan matchup. Number 9.
Whoa, before we get into this, so here's the interesting thing about that match between Hogan and The Rock. I remember back in like 2017 or 18, where Cody Rhodes himself, the American Nightmare, said that that match was the greatest match ever. So I'm very interested to know if he still feels that way, or where does he rank that match in like one of his favorite of all time. Now, before we get into number 9, with the match between Shawn Michaels and Undertaker at WrestleMania 25, I'll say this. It don't matter what match came after this match here. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair for them. They put on a clinic. There isn't too many matches in the history of WCW, WWE, WWF, ECW, let alone WrestleMania, that can follow up this match. They literally told the people who came up after, like, yo, they got Six Flags and Disneyland built over here. So what we want you to do is build up a competitor, and we're only going to give you a budget of like $10.15. And unless you go out and ball out at the dollar store and find something crazy on Etsy or buy stuff off of Temu, you ain't gonna have a chance. And no one had a chance after this match is over. So to be fair, they put on a clinic. It just wasn't fair for nobody.
This is The Undertaker, WrestleMania 25. Greatness was achieved at WrestleMania 25 when Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker stole the show. Both men put on a clinic, and some fans classed the match as the single greatest match in the history of WrestleMania. Due to how outstanding the match was, there was not a single match on the face of the earth that could successfully follow it. And this meant that the main event matchup of Randy Orton vs. Triple H was met with a lukewarm response. In WWE's defense, at the time, Orton vs. Triple H headlining the show was the right call. The feud was red hot, and fans were expecting a war between the two foes on the grandest stage. Unfortunately, the match fell flat as both men wrestled as if they weren't in an epic blood feud. Appearing on Out of Character,
I just thought about this. When it comes to Triple H being in the main event of WrestleMania, this man can't catch a break. Like, he can put on great matches, but for some reason, he always ends up following one of the greatest matches of all time. This man can't catch a break, bro.
Spoke about the pressure of main eventing following the HBK vs. Undertaker match, and this is what the former WWE champion had to say. I remember being in the locker room with Triple H, and they had a little monitor back there. We were watching Undertaker vs. Shawn Michaels, and he's just sitting there. I saw what is happening, but he was being vocal about like, god damn it. I'm like, oh, they're having a great match. What's the problem? Well, we're gonna have to follow that kid. Choke slam, kick out, super kick, kick out, tombstone, kick out, 1, 2. Oh, the whole crowd is gonna be tired. Number 8, John Cena vs. The Undertaker, WrestleMania 34. It's well documented just how much of a failure the main event of WrestleMania 34 ended up being. The show was main evented by Brock Lesnar vs. Roman Reigns for the Universal title, and the match was atrocious in every aspect. And it featured a crowd that wanted no part in seeing the match in the main event slot. In terms of what match should have main evented, WWE had numerous options. Firstly, they had the dream match between John Cena and The Undertaker. If WWE extended the match to a main event level length, something The Undertaker was pushing for, then the match would have fully deserved the main event spotlight. Other matches that could have easily headlined included a show-stealing Ronda Rousey and Kurt Angle vs. Triple H and Stephanie McMahon mixed tag, and potentially AJ Styles vs. Shinsuke Nakamura. That's if WWE committed to giving the two talents free reign in delivering a match for the ages. Number 7, Triple H.
Now here's the thing, like, really quick. When it comes to Roman Reigns, I know a lot of people are tired of him having a title right now and him having headlines of WrestleMania or main event WrestleMania and stuff like that. But what's interesting to note is that before he became the tribal chief, before he turned heel, when you talk about and this is no shade towards him, when you talk about 10 of the worst WrestleMania main events of all time, he's in at least 2 of them. Okay, we got to be honest. He's in at least 2 of them. But as of lately, he hasn't been putting out any trash. He hasn't. As far as main events of WrestleMania, it may be boring, it may be tired, but for the match itself, it has not been that.
This is The Undertaker, WrestleMania 27. It's incredibly likely that WrestleMania 27 was only main evented by John Cena versus The Miz.
I can't believe this match was
implied involvement. If The Rock
I can't believe that match was that bad, bro. I
wasn't
can't.
involved as the host of WrestleMania, then another match would have likely been the main event slot, and that match would have been the Triple H versus Undertaker showdown. WrestleMania 27 is often regarded as one of the worst WrestleMania events of all time.
Yeah.
And for good reason, yet the Game versus the Dead Man was a truly epic encounter that saved the show from being a complete train wreck. If the show was main evented by these 2 legends, then the show as a whole may have been looked on more fondly in the eyes of the
nobody
WWE
saving that
fanbase.
show, bro. It
Number
wasn't.
6, Ric Flair vs Randy Savage, WrestleMania
Yes.
8. It came as a huge surprise when Ric Flair vs Randy Savage for the WWE title didn't headline WrestleMania 8. As well as having a truly personal rivalry heading into the match, the actual match was an utter masterpiece. The match highlighted just how tremendous Flair and Savage were, and the match, if it was placed in the main event slot, would have been labelled as one of the best main events of the 90s. Instead of the WWE title match main eventing the show going off the air with a Savage title win, WWE opted to have Hogan vs Sid main event the show. This main event match was a dull affair, and it was only in the main event slot as it featured Hogan as well as a return of the Ultimate Warrior. Number 5.
Now, to be fair about that WrestleMania match, it had a double main event. So the Savage versus Flair was the first main event, but then the Hogan versus Sid was the second main event, which I get what they're saying because that was the main event that went off the show. But the sad part is that if you wrestle all your life, you main event WrestleMania, and as soon as you says that you're versus Sid Vicious or Psycho Sid, you're going to have one of the worst WrestleMania matches of all time. And no disrespect to Sid, it just seems he's had 2 WrestleMania main events, and both of them were terrible. Both were terrible. That's nuts to me. That's nuts.
Angle versus Rey Mysterio versus Randy Orton.
This match was so
22.
good, man.
It was previously an expectation that if a wrestler won the annual Royal Rumble, then they would main event WrestleMania. However, in 2006, Royal Rumble winner Rey Mysterio didn't main event the show, and instead he was given a 9-minute world title matchup against Kurt Angle and Randy Orton. Whilst the time limit didn't impact the matchup, it was 9 minutes of non-stop action, and if the match was placed in the main event position of the show, fans would have no doubt witnessed a classic. This isn't to say the main event of WrestleMania 22 was bad, as the John Cena vs Triple H match for the WWE title was great.
Triple H main events get overshadowed again, bro.
Yet the visual of WrestleMania going off the air with Mysterio as world champion would have been truly incredible. Number 4, Diesel vs.
But to be fair, Triple H, those matches were pretty good matches, so I'm not going to take that from him.
Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 11. WWE's business wasn't in the best place in 1995, so they decided to latch on to any mainstream attention they could. For WrestleMania 11, instead of having a WWE title match main event the show, they decided to have Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow main event. This was a controversial move, as WWE needed to create new stars, and booking a celebrity in the main event of WrestleMania and booking that celebrity to win the matchup was the opposite of what they should have been doing. The rightful main event was easily Diesel vs Shawn Michaels for the WWE title, as the match had a strong story and the quality of the match was worthy of a WrestleMania main event. Number 3, Bret Hart vs Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Absolutely one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time.
Although the WWE product was seeing a surge of popularity by WrestleMania 13, the main event of the show wasn't reflective of the product to come. The Undertaker and Sid engaged in a lackluster main event that had little build and didn't warrant such an elite position on the card. It's a common consensus that the main event of the show should have been the Undisputed Classic between Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin. These two icons faced off in a submission match, and the match wasn't just known for its quality, it was also the unofficial start of the Attitude Era, as Stone Cold emerged as one of the hottest acts in pro wrestling. Number 2, Charlotte Flair vs Sasha Banks vs Becky Lynch, WrestleMania 32.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Roman Reigns' character was being met with disdain by the time he main evented WrestleMania 32. That year's Mania was main evented by Triple H vs Roman Reigns, and the match was heavily panned, as the fans loathed Reigns at the time and they had zero interest in seeing the matchup unfold. WWE had the perfect opportunity to deliver something new and fresh for the main event of the aforementioned WrestleMania, and this would have been to have the women's division take center stage. The match of the show was ultimately the triple threat match for the women's title between Charlotte, Sasha Banks, and Becky Lynch, and seeing the three women in the main event position would have been a major deal. If this had occurred, WWE may have liked to have changed the finish, as Banks, who was immensely popular at the time, winning the matchup and the title would have been an incredibly positive way to bring WrestleMania to a close. And number one, The Undertaker versus...
That's the crazy part, because that should have been the main event, but we know that Vince McMahon was not going for that. He was not going for that. And at the same time, that match between Roman Reigns and Triple H, the interest was so long, and the match itself was so, it felt like I was watching like 4 movies, dude. I was bored, but I still stuck around. I'm like, okay, maybe something will happen after that'll get me intrigued to watch the Raw after WrestleMania, and nothing happened, man. That was crazy.
CM Punk, WrestleMania 29.
I agree
CM
with
Punk
that
had
too.
an incredible year leading up to Mania 29, and he without question should have headlined the show. Whether Punk made evented the show versus The Undertaker, or he was inserted into the John Cena vs. Rock rematch, it didn't matter to the fans, and it didn't matter to Punk, who was hurt that he wasn't main eventing the show. The match Punk had with The Undertaker on show was widely acclaimed, and Punk clearly went into the match with a chip on his shoulder. The actual main event of the show, that being Cena vs. The Rock 2, paled in comparison to the WrestleMania 28 encounter, and WWE were quite rightly heavily criticized for delivering a once-in-a-lifetime matchup a second time. Thankfully, all hope isn't lost when it comes to Punk main eventing a WrestleMania event, and now that he's back in WWE, it's likely that if he's fit and healthy, he will be in the main event slot come WrestleMania 41 in 2025. But there you have it, folks. Matches that...
The thing is, like, with that type of thing, that's more of a hindsight, it's 2020 type of situation, because if I didn't know how the matchups were going to turn out, and they told me, where should I put John Cena versus The Rock 2? It would have to be on the main event. I mean, it just is what it is. Those are too big of stars to not have them in the main event. But I guess when you look back at it, that is a thing. Now, WrestleMania 2025, if it happened in Chicago, as CM Punk was trying to hint on Monday Night Raw, I'm there, bro. In my hometown, CM Punk being in the main event of WrestleMania, bro, I'm getting... I don't know, bro. I'm going to take out like 5 loans and be as close to the ring as possible, bro. I got to be there. But what are some matches that should have main evented a WrestleMania that they did not list on this video? Let me know in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you guys. Salute. Peace. Have a